guest is Daniel Pipes, founder and editor of Middle East Quarterly and senior lecturer at the University of Pennsylvania. He joins us to discuss his recent book, Conspiracy, how the paranoid style flourishes and where it comes from.
Daniel Pipes, what is your book, Conspiracy, all about?
My book, Conspiracy, is about a way of thinking that originated about 2.5 centuries ago and has had major and terrible consequences for the world.
What is a conspiracy?
Well, conspiracy is a collusion among more than one person to engage in illegal activity. But my topic here, despite the title, is not so much about conspiracies, but about conspiracy theories. The wrong-headed fear of conspiracy, the overwhelming, overpowering, and exaggerated fear of conspiracies.
Where do you start?
Well, in a sense, it begins with the origins of man. But in its political form, it begins in the Crusades, where we find in the 12th, 13th century the beginnings of the fear, the exaggerated fear of a Jewish conspiracy, an exaggerated fear of a secret society conspiracy, the Templars in particular. And it grows a little bit over the centuries, but it's not until about 1750 that it takes a political form. And it enters into the political arena in a serious way with the French Revolution. And then grows and gets extended throughout the 19th century. And really with World War I becomes a significant factor in politics and reaches its climax in World War II. Here in World War II you have a Hitler who is consumed with fears of Jewish conspiracy, and a Stalin who's consumed with fears of a secret society conspiracy, of a British and American conspiracy. And they almost take over the world between 1939 and 1941. They fail, of course. And with the destruction of the Nazi Empire and then the Soviet Empire, the fear of conspiracies recedes. It's not gone, but it's certainly far less significant today than it was some 50, 60 years ago.
I remember a really early date in there, 10, 11, the year 1000 or something like that, where the Jewish conspiracy thing started?
Yes, it was with the origins of the First Crusade, 1096, that we find the Crusaders spewing theories about Jewish plots against the Christian world.
Who were the Crusaders?
Crusaders were, by and large, well-off aristocratic Europeans, mostly French, but others as well, mostly knights, going off to win the Holy Land, win what's now Israel, from the Muslims.
And so where did this Jewish hatred start and conspiracy?
Well, the Jewish hatred goes back much further to the very origins of Christianity, seeing Jews as perfidious, as the killers of Christ, seeing them as people who rejected the Christ. So that has antecedents that go way back, but this notion of a conspiracy of Jews, Jews trying to harm the Christians, that only goes back to the Crusades and becomes a significant political force only some 200 or even 150 years ago, and culminates with the Nazis. But I mean, there is the key point is there is a history to this. This is not just ideas that have always been in human minds. And my focus in this book is not the fear that you and I might have of our rival in the firm or our neighbor. What I'm talking about here primarily are conspiracy theories to take over the world. I give it an ism. I call it conspiracism. And I think it's like nationalism or fascism or liberalism. It's a body of ideas. And what's so striking is that over some 2 centuries, the body of ideas, whether they be anti-Jewish or anti-secret society, keep recurring and recurring. They come back over and over again. And the ideas which are present today, which we'll no doubt talk about, one can find their origins very clearly in the 18th century. Pat Robertson, for example, candidate for president, distinguished figure in many ways, important person. And he wrote a book in 1991 called The New World Order that's a pastiche of ideas that have been current. It's almost a renewal of a book that was written in the 1790s. It's using the same ideas, same fantasies. And there's a whole literature, a vast literature of these conspiracy theories. And they range very widely. I mean, I'm including, say, the 2,000 books about the death of John F. Kennedy. I'm thinking about the ideas of Louis Farrakhan, that there's a white conspiracy or a Jewish conspiracy or a Masonic conspiracy against blacks. I'm thinking about the far left ideas, that there's a business conspiracy. They go on, and I think their general effect has been just a very, very harmful one on humanity at large.
You say that there's even a Lincoln limousine tour that starts at the Dallas Love Field?
Yeah, there's a commercialism as well. That's one example, but there are a lot of movies, a lot of books, a lot of stories, there are even museums. For example, in Dallas for the Kennedy assassination, but also in New Mexico for the alleged UFO landing. I think more broadly speaking, the conspiracy theorists fall into two categories. The more serious and worrisome are those who are politically disaffected, who are at the extremes of the political spectrum, right or left. But there's a second phenomenon, which is made up of people who are quite prosperous and don't have any particular problems in life, but who are intrigued by conspiracy theories. The Kennedy assassination might be the best single example. People who are just entranced by this, who pay hundreds of thousands of dollars for artifacts, original artifacts from the assassination. People who, less engaged, will go to Dallas and take a tour and kind of relive the assassination and try and figure out for themselves what actually happened. It's become a cult-like topic, and there are movies and there are books and there are unending discussion groups on the internet and the like.
What do you think of Oliver Stone?
Well, Oliver Stone is an extreme conspiracy theorist, but he's a playful sort. I'm not saying that playful is without consequence or without damage, but he isn't really, he's not someone who's poor, he's not someone who's a political extremist, but he's playing with these ideas. I think it's harmful, because at stake is how you and I see the world. Are we going to look at it straight, or are we, like the conspiracy theorists, going to say, things are not what they appear to be? There's someone out there who's trying to spin a web of intrigue against us.
You say that conspiracists rely on the book.
The book is very prominent, yes. There are those who rely on radio and television, internet, newspapers, magazines, word of mouth. But ultimately, books have been the key documents in the development of conspiracy theories. And over and over again you find, after the far right or aestheticists, they invariably say that there was a book that changed their lives. They read something, and they came out a new person. It's like a conversion from something into something else, from one religion into another religion. Now that's only a small number. Most people don't give up their normal lives, give up their families to devote themselves to pursuing conspiracy theories. But I think it's indicative of the kind of seriousness and importance that people attribute to these ideas.
Where are you from?
I'm originally from Cambridge, Massachusetts, Boston area, and I've got degrees mostly in history and in Middle Eastern studies. And actually, this book was preceded by a previous book, also on the subject of conspiracy theories, but on the theories in the Middle East. It's called The Hidden Hand. It came out from St. Martin's Press in 1996. It's a bigger book. It's a more detailed book. Here what I could do was build on the works of many other authors. There's a substantial literature on conspiracy theories in Western history, American, European. In the Middle East, I was all on my own. The Middle East, I took up this topic because if you look around the Middle East today, Saddam Hussein, Ayatollah Khomeini, and all the other major figures, almost every one of them is an adherent of conspiracy theories. And they have moved history. They have led to wars, repression, terrorism. And so I tried to understand what this mentality signifies and where it comes from. And I found in tracing back where it comes from the West, it comes from Europe. And I started researching that, and I realized my book was getting too big. I put it away. And then an editor at the Free Press suggested that I turn that European section into a book. So this, in a sense, is an afterthought.
Cambridge, Massachusetts for how many years?
Oh, I lived there from birth till I was almost 30. My family's connected to Harvard.
Doing what?
My father's a professor, was until recently a professor of Russian history.
His name?
Richard Pipes.
And did you grow up in that? Did you go to school up there?
I did, went to Harvard, yes. Undergraduate and graduate.
What did you study?
Taught there. I studied history. I studied partly intellectual history, which is what this is. the history of ideas. In this case, history of very bizarre and corrupt ideas, but ideas nonetheless. And I study the Middle East.
And what was it like growing up in the home of Richard Pipes?
Well, it was a intellectual, high-brow, fast-paced atmosphere.
Were there others in the family besides you?
I have a younger brother, yes, but he opted out of this particular line of work.
And what did you get your PhD in?
I got it in the history of the Middle East. And my first book, my PhD, was on the early history, the very origins of Islam. Trying to understand how Islam, which is a religion, can have such a widespread impact on the life of Muslims. So I took up the topic of the use of slaves as soldiers, and why, only in the Muslim world, do you find the systematic use of slaves as soldiers? From India to Spain, throughout the medieval period, slaves were used as soldiers, and nowhere else on a regular basis. And I asked, how could this be connected to Islam? And several of my books since then have been on Islam and its role in politics.
Now, does your family go back to Europe somewhere?
Yes, both my parents came from Europe in the 40s.
Where?
From Poland.
You have in the book a lot of references to the protocols of the elders of Zion. What were they? What is it?
The Protocols is quite an extraordinary document. It was a forgery, promptly put together by the Tsarist secret police, the Okhrana, in the 1890s, late 1890s, for rather special purposes, to convince the Tsar that the liberals were working against his interests. It languished for some 20 years, and after World War I is a key period for conspiracism. In the turmoil and upset of the post-war period, these protocols, this forgery, was translated to German and had a major impact on German thinking, and then spread from Germany around the world. And it alleges that there is a group of Jewish leaders who get together and plot out their control of the world. It's very turgid. It's hard to read.
How big is it?
100 pages or less. It's a challenge. I mean, it's not exciting reading. It's not something that I think most people have actually read who cite it. It's tough.
Have you?
Yeah, I made my way through it. I had to, but if I could not
Translated
have.
into English?
Yeah, I was translated to English right back there in 1920, 22. So I read the kind of classic translation of it. It had an impact in this country as well. For example, Henry Ford was a great proponent of the Protocols. Again, the book, key. And he later recanted, and by 1927 said it was a forgery, and he wished he hadn't supported it, but it was a bit late at that point.
The original Henry Ford Motor Company.
That's right, Henry Ford, the founder of Ford Motor Company. The Protocols are still hawked here, for example, by the Nation of Islam, by Louis Farrakhan's organization, but by and large are to be found in the non-Western world. They've actually become bestseller in places like Lebanon and I believe in Japan, and they keep on coming
Today.
back. Yeah, well, not right today, but in the 1970s, and not so long ago. They keep coming back. They're proven over and again to be a forgery, and yet they keep coming back, and they can't be stomped out. And actually, conspiracism has a lot of forgeries, a lot of documents, pseudo-documents that keep coming back and prove the point that there really is a Jewish or a secret society conspiracy.
Let me ask you about the Protocols. You're PhD and you intellectual and think about all this stuff, and you say it's tough to get through the Protocols. Why would a mass population buy it, or why would they be a bestseller?
I don't think, it's one of those documents I don't think people actually read, but they're told what's inside it and they believe it. I mean, it's a simple idea that this is a gathering of Jewish leaders who are plotting out their control of the world. But actually to read it is another story.
As you're wading through it, though, what do you read about? Why is it so hard to understand?
Well, it's not exactly hard to understand. It's just boring and turgid, sort of long-winded and with lots of excursuses. It's not written in a style that would keep your attention. And there's some bizarre ideas in there. For example, the notion that the 1890s was when the first subways were being built around the world. And there was some worry that these subways would be used by revolutionaries. And in the Protocols, the so-called elders are saying, well, let's use the subways to bomb the cities. An idea that dates back a century ago. No one would think of it now, but full of strange ambitions. actually, the book, what makes it even stranger,